Hi guys, in this video we're going to have a look at how we can develop a desktop application with Java. So developing a desktop application is something which you may well choose to do for your internal assessment. It's not necessarily required that you do that for your internal assessment, but it is a lot of students' choice. Now, if you're developing an application, there are different types of application you can develop. So, for example, you could build a web application, you could build a mobile application for Android or iPhone, but those can be quite tricky, and normally I wouldn't recommend them unless you have more experience. So what we're going to do at the moment is we're going to start off with using Swing, which is a simple way to design applications. It's built into Java, and even if you want to move on to doing things like web application development or mobile application development later on, the principles that you learn from working with Swing are going to be really useful to understand those more complicated environments. Okay, so another big advantage of Swing is that if you're using Eclipse, then Eclipse comes with a built-in editor to help you design your Swing application. So the first thing we'll do is we'll install that editor. And to do that, go to the Help menu and then go down to Eclipse Marketplace. You might think it would be install new software, but it's not. It's Eclipse Marketplace. And then in the find box up here, type Window Builder. Now if you do a search, you should get a couple of different matches, but the one that you want is where it says Window Builder 1.9.4. So click on Install. I've already installed it on my computer because it takes about 5 minutes. But once it's installed, you'll need to click I agree to all of the legal babble and that kind of thing. And then once it's installed, you'll need to restart Eclipse. Now I've also created a new workspace, so we don't need to import TBS or anything like that now. We're going to create everything from the very beginning ourselves. So this is basically a clean workspace, and I'm going to right click here and go to New Java Project. And since this is our first application, let's just call it App 1. Now it comes up with this window which says create a new module info.java file. Now you won't get that window unless you've chosen a more recent version of Java. I'm using Java 14 here, and all you have to do is just click on Don't Create. So if you click on Create, it will make a little file module info, which for us is just annoying. So if you do click Create and it appears, then you can delete it afterwards, and it will that will solve the problem. But I just click Don't Create, and now I've got an empty project for my first application. So the application that I want to create, it's going to be a really simple application. I was trying to think of something that we could do, and I thought we'll pick this as something that connects a bit to sports science. So this is about the number of calories that you should consume each day. And we can make a simple application that calculates that based on a couple of different controls. So the first is you have to choose if you're male or female, and the second is how much exercise you get each day, and then it's going to tell you how many calories you should consume each day. So it's a really simple application, and I'm going to create that by going over to Source and click New. And normally we go to Class because we'd be creating a class for our program. But because we're going to create a user interface, we'll actually go all the way down to the bottom and choose Other. And then once you've chosen Other, you've got this list of different things that Eclipse can create, and you want this tab, Window Builder. And inside Window Builder, you want Swing Designer. And then inside Swing Designer, you want to create an application window. So I click on that, and then I choose a name for my application window. So let's just call it capital A, App 1. Okay, and here I am inside my program code. Now Eclipse has created some basic code to get you started here, and you can actually click run and see what it does. It just creates an empty window, okay, and this empty window is where we're going to build our application. So I'll click close. Now I could build my application completely by just typing code, program code, into this window, but there's a quicker way to design your user interface. What I'll do is I'll click on the Design tab, and then it switches to a visual editor over here. So I can click on my window design. Now let's say that first of all I'm going to want my window to be square, I think, so I'm going to move this over a little bit. And I want my window to have a title, so I'll click on the top, and then I'll go over to this area where it says properties, and you'll see there's a property here called title. So I can just type the title I want into here. So I'll put I don't know, what was it, daily energy usage. So that will be the title of my window. And once I type it in here, you can see that it appears in the window here. Now if I switch back to the source tab, it's actually added in that line of program code to change the title of the window. Okay, so the changes that I make on the Design tab will create code inside the source tab. Now to some extent it works the other way as well. So if, for example, I change that title, daily energy usage, in my program, if I change that to energy usage calculator and then click on Design, you can see that the design view has updated because I've changed the program code. But a bit of a word of warning, if you change things in the Design tab, then it will update the code very reliably. But if you start editing the code, it can get confused and it can mess up the Design tab. So what I recommend is that if you make a class using the Window Builder application, then you pretty much always edit it in the Design tab. If you want to write complicated program code, then create a new class for that which isn't using Window Builder, so that you keep your Window Builder things separate from the rest of your program, and it just tends to prevent Eclipse from messing up. Okay, so here's our application window. Now if we go back to our application description here, the first thing I want to do is to have an option where you can choose whether you're a man or a woman. So I'm going to do that using two radio buttons. Now a radio button you probably recognize from web pages. It's this kind of, oh, hold on, there's something I've got to do first of all. So I was going to put something onto my application window, and you might notice that the application window at the moment is split into 5 parts. So this is north, east, south, west, and center. And when you create an application window, this is the default way in which your application is going to be laid out, with these 5 different parts. Now I don't want to use those 5 parts. I want to just put things wherever I want them to go. So I'm going to do that by going over to here and clicking on the absolute layout option, and then move over and click, and that will change the way that my application is laid out. Now there are different ways to lay out your application, and they all have their own advantages. The absolute layout is actually in some ways one of the worst ways of laying things out, because what it means is that you can put things exactly where you like, but if somebody resizes the screen or resizes the window, then it's not necessarily going to look as good, because your application won't adapt to different screen sizes. But for today's exercise, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to go with the easiest option. Okay, so after I clicked on absolute layout and I've clicked on the window, I'm now ready to take my radio button and move it over to the window, and then just drop that radio button onto the window. I want 2 because there are 2 genders, as everybody knows. Now what I'm going to do is click on the top radio button, Now you can see it's got a label. It says new radio button. I'm going to change that to say male. And then I'll click on the second one down and I'll change that to say female. Okay, so now I've got those two buttons. Now I probably want a label to go with them, so I'll go over to components and I'm going to choose JLabel and then pop the label in here, make it a little bit bigger maybe, and I'm going to change the text to say gender, and I'm going to change the text font to be a little bit bigger, and I think I'm also going to align it to the right. So if I go to horizontal alignment, I can choose right, and then okay, it's not that beautiful. I probably need to move that back a little bit because it's, let's try that. Okay, it's not amazing, but obviously you can see what that's supposed to be. So I've created a gender selector there. You can choose male or female, and if we go back to the source, you can see that it's created those lines of my program. Now if I run the program, we can just check that it works. So there's my options, but one problem is that if I click on male and then click on female, okay, I've got a little bit confused because you can actually choose both. We don't want that to happen. So what we have to do is tell Java that those two radio buttons are, you can only choose one of the options. Now the first thing to do is I'm going to click on that radio button and just make sure that it has a shorter name. So this radio button is stored in a variable in Java, and you can see the name of the variable here. It's called RadButton new radio button, okay, which is a really long and difficult name to type. So I'm going to give this a more sensible name. I'm going to call it male radio button. And then I'll click on this one and I'll call it female radio button. Now if I go back to my program, you can see in my program that the names of those variables have changed, okay? So this is where it makes the female radio button, this is where it makes the male radio button. Now you don't have to change the names of those variables, but I think that if you create things using the designer, it tends to give those things very awkward variable names, and it just makes your code harder to read and to edit. So it's better if you give them easier variable names. Now to tell Java that those two radio buttons can't both be selected at the same time, what I need to do is create a button group. So I'll put button group, let's just put button group there, equals new button group, and then import button group. And then I need to add both of those radio buttons to the button group that I created. Okay, my Eclipse is a bit damaged. Okay, I hope your Eclipse works better than mine. I probably need to just reinstall Eclipse at this stage. Okay, so I created a button group and then I added both of those buttons to the button group. Now that doesn't change the visual design, but if I run the app, I should find now that if I click on one button, the other button is automatically deselected. Okay, so Java knows that those two buttons represent exclusive options, mutually exclusive options. Okay, now the second part of my app is we need to have a way to select how active you are. So whether you do lots of exercise or very little exercise, you can probably guess what my answer would be. I could have radio buttons for that as well, but I think what we'll do is we'll use a slider. So this is another component. It's down the bottom here, slider. I'm going to click and drag that over here. And let's put it in that space. Now I'm going to take that gender label and copy and paste it so that I can have another label with the same font style. and let's just change the text on that to say exercise. And I'll put in a couple more labels. So let's have one label down here which says sedentary. And then on the other side, need to make it a bit bigger. And then on the other side, I'll have a label which says very active. Okay, so now if I run the application again, and I've got this slider which allows people to choose how much exercise they get. Are they sedentary or are they very active? You can represent it on this scale. Okay, now the last thing I want to do is I want to have a button which you can click, and when you click the button it's going to tell you how many calories you should consume each day. So let's pick the J button and I'll put that here. Put some text on it, we'll call it calculate. And then I need somewhere to write the answer, so I'll use a label again to display the answer. I'll just pull that out, make it a bit bigger. Now we don't have an answer yet, so I'm not going to put any text on it. I'm just going to set the text to empty. But when we have an answer, it's going to appear in there. Actually, just so that you can see it while we're designing the form, let's write in answer will appear here. And maybe I'll give it a bigger text font as well. Okay. And then I'll just resize the window a bit so that it looks a bit neater if I move that up. Okay, and let's check that it looks alright. Okay. Now, what we need to do is make something happen when we click the calculate button. So let's look at how we can do that. Now, if you click on the calculate button, you'll see that we have all of these different properties down here. But if we want something to actually happen when you click the button, that's what's called an action. There are ways to create applications, to create actions which can happen in your application. And I'm not going to go into all of the different ways that you can create actions, because here what we can do is create actions which can be connected to menu items and things like that. But we're just going to do a very simple type of action here. So to create that action, you just double click on the button. And then inside your program code, you'll see that it's created an action listener. So add action listener. And what that does is inside the brackets, you can write some program code which will happen when you click that button. So if I do an example, I'm just going to put, Eclipse is so annoying. So, go away Eclipse. I've been programming with IntelliJ over the holiday and it's so much nicer, but Eclipse is what we have at school, even though we never go into school at the moment. Okay, I'll just type something in here. Okay, so then let's say that I type in a system.out.println, and then when I run it and click the button, you can see that it prints out that text on the screen. Okay, so we can use this to calculate our answer and display it in the window. So if I go back to the form design, first of all what I want to do is just tidy up some of these labels. So some of the program code, you can see it's getting a little bit messy, a little bit hard to read. I want to tidy it up a little bit. The first thing I'm going to do is give that button an easy to read name. So I'm going to call it the calculate button. And this label, which is where the answer will appear, I'm going to give that a sensible name. I'm going to call it answer label. Okay, now this is where we need to do a little bit of direct programming. We can't do this just by dragging and dropping things in the user interface designer. So when I click the calculate button, what I want to happen is to change this label to show the answer. So first of all, let's just look at how I can change that label. Now remember that I called that label answer label, and here it is in my program code. So I created the answer label here. This is where it sets the text font. This is where it sets the location on the form. Now I want to make it so that when you click the button, it changes that label. Now in order to do that, I need to set the text of the label. So I could type answer label dot set text. I'm going to have to reinstall Eclipse really soon. Okay, and then let's just put hello on that label. Now when I do that, you can see the answer label is underlined in red, and that's because Java doesn't know what the variable answer label refers to. And the reason for that is because answer label is declared underneath the calculate button. So I need to change the order around. I need to make sure that that answer label comes before calculate button, so that when I talk about answer label here, Java already knows what answer label refers to. Okay, so this is the kind of problem that you can only deal with by looking at the text of your source code. You wouldn't be able to fix that kind of problem over here so easily. So I'm not sure if you can fix it at all within the user interface designer. So you will always need to be able to switch between the source code and the visual designer. So just to go over what I've done, okay, I double clicked on this button, and that creates this bit of code which creates an action listener. Now an action listener is some Java code which will execute when somebody clicks the button. And inside the action listener, this action performed method, I can write some Java code which will happen when someone clicks the button. Now the Java code that I've written sets the text of the answer label, and the answer label is that label that I created up here. So if I run the program now, then click the calculate button, you notice that the text on the label changes to say hello. Now the last thing that I want to do is I want to actually perform the correct calculation. Okay, so first of all what I need to do is do 10 times weight. Oh goodness, I haven't actually asked for weight, height and age. Right, I can't be bothered to do that at the moment. I think I'm going to leave that as a challenge for you guys to add in age and weight and height and things like that. But just to give you an example of how I could use this in the calculation, let's say that I'm going to say that is it about 2,500 calories for a male and 2,000 calories for a female or something like that? I don't know, but I'm just going to use that really simple calculation in this example. So first of all, I need to see whether the male or the female box were ticked. Now if you remember, the male radio button is a variable called male radio button, and female radio button has that name as well. So down here I can say if male radio button dot now because Eclipse doesn't offer me any help at all, I'm going to guess that the correct method is called isSelected, and it looks like I chose correctly. So let's put that in here, and I'll write 2,500 calories. And then else if female radio button dot is selected, then I'm going to set the text to 2,000 calories. I don't know if these are actually correct. Like, I'm not making any dietary recommendations here. And if they didn't check the male or female box, then I'll set the label on answer label to say, please choose male or female. Okay, so inside that code, which is the action listener for clicking on the button, I see if the male radio button is selected, and if so, I say you need 2,500 calories. If that's not true, I see if the female radio button is selected, and if so, I say that you need 2,000 calories. And if neither button was selected, then I say you have to choose male or female. So let's just test it. I'll click play. And then if I click calculate, it says please choose male or female, although it doesn't quite fit the message in. So I'll choose male, 2,500, female, 2,000 calories. So guys, you can see here how we can build a simple application which can take some information and perform a calculation. Okay, now, like I said, when you are developing your application, it's good to split it up, particularly because the user interface designer tends to create a lot of code which is kind of messy, kind of long and difficult to read. So if I was creating this code and I wanted to use it in a real application, then I would probably create a second class, which I might call something like energy calculator. And then in that second class, I could move some of this program code into that class so that this class, the app1, only did user interface things. And the more difficult work, where I do all of the calculations, that could be in this class, so that I'm not combining too many things into one big messy ball, right? I like to split things out and be as organized as possible. That organization of your program is one of the really important things to becoming a good programmer. I'm not going to give you an example of that now, because I'd have to add in a lot of extra stuff, and then we'd have to sort of like break down the program a lot more, and that's where I want to get you guys actually developing your own program. But I hope that introduction gives you an idea of how we can build applications, and then my challenge for you is to implement the things that I didn't implement. Okay, so we want to have on the design a box where you can enter your weight. Now for that, you probably want to use the JSpinner, which is a box where you can enter a number. And we also want to have a box where you can enter your height. So again, that probably would be a JSpinner, so that you can enter a number. And then you also want to use the exercise value from this slider, and then combine all of those things to output a result using the formula on this sheet. Okay, I think that's probably quite a long video, but I hope it was helpful for you guys. Like I said, this is a topic which a lot of people will build like with more advanced techniques. A lot of people will use this method to create the app for their internal assessment. So I hope that it is useful for you, and if there's anything that you're not sure about, please do ask me so that I can give you a bit of help.